Fox News had a confrontation last night, and it was centered around Geraldo Rivera as he decided to check the ghetto, quote unquote, ghetto bona fides of another host. Let's take a look at that clip.
Leo, here's the question. She said, I appreciate the role of white allies in this movement of progress. I don't believe that they have the lived experience to lead a majority minority city.
That is the most insulting, racist comment. You know what she's saying? She's saying, because you're white, you don't understand what we as black people go through regarding crime. That makes the assumption then that Joe Biden doesn't know. To say that she is basically in a better position because she's black is insulting, is racist, and it makes no sense whatever. I reject that argument. I reject that argument.
Hey, Leo, when was the last time you were in the ghetto? Wait a second.
Well, how dare you say that, sir? I was born, I lived right near the Coliseum. That's where I was born.
I'm from Avenue C, dude.
Next to the Coliseum. How dare you say that?
That
you know
knowledge
nothing
that
about
I
me.
have is helpful.
How dare you say that?
That knowledge I have is helpful.
Insulting.
That knowledge that I have from my background is helpful.
What are you trying to draw?
Geraldo, do you think?
Let her try. Let her try.
What are you trying to
Let her try to. Let her try a kinder approach. Maybe it'll work.
You know what?
We certainly haven't.
You know what Bill just accused me of?
Bill
Hammer just accused Bill. You know what Geraldo accused me of? He accused me of living in a particular area that I don't understand. How dare you? I've been a civil rights attorney for 30 years. I have fought against discrimination for 30 years.
Okay,
check out
Jesus
How
on
dare
earth.
you? How dare you?
Listen,
You're fabulous,
I love you both.
How dare you?
Wait, guys, hey.
Now there's plenty to unpack between what just happened between Geraldo Rivera and Leo Terrell. But I want to give the proper context. They're discussing the new mayor of St. Louis and her comments as it pertains to her role being the first black woman to be the mayor of the city and providing proper representation. And I have a couple of clips from an interview that she did on CNN. I want us to take a look at the first one because I think that we need this context to really understand how ridiculous this Fox News segment really was. Let's take a look.
In a city that's 45% African American, 45% white, and the rest other populations of color. We are a majority minority city, and what I heard from voters is that they are ready for a black woman to lead this city, that a black woman has lived experiences that others do not. And also I am a daughter of the most neglected part of the city, which is North St. Louis. I was born and raised there. And my plans are to definitely revitalize that part of the city. And I'm ready for St. Louis to thrive instead of just survive. Well, in previous elections, we were being governed by the minority. You could win mayor with only winning 33% of the vote. And so what we saw, our new voting system allows for voting by or being governed by the majority. And obviously 52% of the voters in St. Louis elected me on Tuesday. We need to provide opportunities, everyone to succeed, no matter their zip code, the color of their skin, who they love, or how they worship.
Now that's Tashara Jones. She's the first black woman mayor of St. Louis, outlining exactly what representation matters in this case. And this is what they were arguing over on Fox News last night. But she put a fine point on it when the host of CNN, that segment, asked her about the fact that St. Louis still has segregated or separate police unions and firefighter unions, a black police union and a white police union. Let's take a look at that.
Obviously, there is a level of mistrust within our first responders and public safety department, and we have to have the hard and difficult conversations to heal those divides. I think St. Louis is long overdue for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission because we have had systemic policies that have increased inequalities for decades and for generations, and that has to stop.
Now, last but not least, of course, representation isn't everything. We've seen plenty of black mayors across this country that we have had to call to task because their policies are not helpful. But this last clip where she really puts it in context, a conversation that she had with her son, particularly with regard to her now being the quote unquote boss of the police force and him feeling a sense of safety because he could now rest easy because his mother was in charge of the police. Let's listen in.
We were having a conversation before I started running about what it does, and he asked, well, mommy, are you gonna be a police? And I said, yes. Indirectly, the police chief will report to me. And he said, well, that means I'm going to be safe. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because his mom shouldn't have to become mayor in order for him to feel safe with interactions with our law enforcement or any child. And so I want to build a St. Louis where my son doesn't feel afraid, and my son is able to be a little boy, little black boy, and explore and learn and make mistakes and not have to lose his life over it.
Okay, so that's the full context, Cenk and Jayar. And listening to her put it in that context, it makes the argument between Geraldo and Leo even more absurd, because both of them in their own way are arguing on the opposite side. They just had that personal disagreement between the two of them. I'm curious what you think, Jay.
Well, I'll say one quick thing, because I mainly want to hear from Jayar. Jayar actually lived in that area, okay? So, but just hashtag boss, right? And sometimes I say that about Nina Turner, sometimes I say it about Anna. But look, it's in this case, it's awesome to have someone like us, and that was their first point, and the point that started the Fox fight in the first place, to represent us when it shouldn't be that surprising. Well, why is it surprising or different or unacceptable or weird or whatever it is to have a black woman be the boss of the police? Hell yes, she is. And I feel safer too. I mean, I don't live in St. Louis, but I would feel safer than if, because she does have that lived experience. Now, that doesn't mean a white man can't do it. Of course not. It depends on the context. It depends on the situation. And look, I love what she said about truth and reconciliation. If you still got segregated unions in a major city in America, Jesus Christ, man. We do this show every day. I still think that I don't get how bad racism still is in this country, let alone the average person, let alone the average right winger. So Jayar.
Yeah, okay, so I guess first thing is to address the fact that they had this conversation. Ben, you pointed out that they're fighting from two opposite ends of this discussion, but the problem is that it's all still self-serving, you know? And this is all based off of a woman who's now mayor of a city, and she's pointing out she's gonna help the people. So the personal story that she told had nothing to do with exalting herself or talking about how her son deserves this kind of protection and no one else does. Her problem is that her son feels this way and he feels a little safer, which by the way, still doesn't make him safe.
Right.
But in fact, could potentially make him unsafe. But also that we're pointing out that the other kids or young folks or adults in the city don't have that same now blanket of security that they feel they have, that he now feels he has, because his mother will be mayor and then the police chief in a way responds to her or answers to her. So that's the first part of it. Now, I'm still trying to find the beef someone could have with anything that she said. I don't know where the division then came from, her pointing out the division that exists in the city, or the lack of representation that exists in the city, which then allows the city to be not very functional for the majority of people who live there. It's such a 2 + 2 equation. I'm still trying to figure out what the problem is. So if you have someone who has never experienced the way certain folks live, and then they want to go represent those folks, what makes us think that they have a good idea of how to represent them? Jake, you point out how I lived in St. Louis. I didn't live anywhere near the north side of St. Louis. I did not live in the hood. I did not live in areas that were, I guess, detached from the rest of everyone else. I was out in West County, bro. And then sometimes we'd play basketball games or football games against other schools in the area. That's when we'd see them. And guess what? We'd always hear from my friends or my teammates, oh man, we're going that way. Oh man, this is gonna be scary. Man, what if something happens? That's the experience I grew up in, trying to tell other folks, because I knew what it was like to be a black person in this country. Hey, well, maybe they're showing up to play basketball.
Maybe you're gonna get hurt on the court.
So I make all those points to point out that I grew up in the West County of St. Louis. I left when I was 16. So if I was looking to run for mayor of St. Louis, I wouldn't know the best way to address things about this part of the city, because I didn't live there. And I'm a black person that's been through a lot of things that black folks experience in this country. And I could tell you the stories, and I could tell you things that we could potentially do if I was a politician that had plans to change things. But I can't do it for parts of the city that I didn't live in and that I have no experience in. So if I'm the mayor, I'm gonna reach out to people like her, not necessarily because she's more qualified than me, or people like her that have lived in different parts and their representation helps me have a more robust approach to serving the people.
Right.
Why is that a bad thing?
And it's never the other way around. So for example, I got a perfect example. I ran 25th District, California for Congress, and I lived right outside of that district, but I did not live in that district. And I got my ass handed to me. And why? In essence, people said, you don't have the lived experience of the people in this community. And so you can't represent them. And that was a largely white community in Santa Clarita. And everybody was like, oh, that makes sense. That guy no, he's not from here. No way, no way. And everybody in the press, without blinking, was like, that's it. The first thing they'd always write is not from this community. So it's okay for a white suburb to do that. And I'm not saying it isn't okay. I'm saying, okay, I hear you, right? And that was a real issue for me, okay? And what I tried to do was I tried to learn as much about the community as I could, and because I needed to represent them, right? So, but nobody even considered that to be an issue. Whereas if you say, hey, maybe you should have the lived experience of a black community, people are like, oh, how could you say that? And then Fox News brings on a black guy to call you racist. Come on.
Yeah, right, because it's all still rooted in political power, right? And distribution of resources and who controls that distribution of resources. And so you have like major cities like St. Louis, who had a white mayor, but it was predominantly black. And so you had even like Ferguson, not too far from the same area. You had for the longest time a majority black city that was run by a majority white city council. And so the inability for them to see how problematic that could be is disingenuous. And that's what Leo Terrell is doing in that clip. He's trying to insert himself as the black face of white supremacy to protect the power structure of those political leaders from ever being taken away from them and handed over to people actually from the community. It's almost like the policing phenomenon, where we're paying all these tax dollars to police who come from out of our city into our city. They take those resources and take them out, and while they're there in our city, they commit police brutality. So it's still the same phenomenon, and they don't want those political power, the powerful in those political positions, to lose that power. And so of course they have to make it an issue of this is a bad angle, when no, absolutely right, Cenk. You need to know the area that you're trying to represent and that you're trying to lead.
See, and that's the point that isn't said from folks like Leo Terrell, isn't that we're looking to protect the folks that usually have these positions and utilize that position of power to benefit themselves or people like them. It won't be said. Instead, you have to blow up and say, how dare you, how dare you, how dare you, sir? Once you start going to that point of how dare yous and how dare yous without any kind of explanation as to why you're offended, you're just trying to now change the subject because he pointed out how you may not know about these surroundings. So again, Leo Terrell, I don't know where he's from or where he grew up or where he started or where he ended up. But if someone then came to me and said, Jayar, you're not even from the city of St. Louis, I would have no else to say except you're right. Because it's true. And when we have this issue with black folks or Latinos, or anyone representing their areas and where they're from, the automatic assumption is that they're unqualified. We're not pointing out that the very first thought is, oh, there's a minority here, and they've been put in place to be a politician in this particular city, state, county, whatever. They must be unqualified. They must be there just because they're black. Think about what you have to feel like, and your assumptions have to be where your first thought is, oh, they're black, they're brown, they must not be qualified. Until they're vetted as qualified, I'm gonna assume that they're not. Think about where you have to come from to think that way.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great point about assumptions. And last thing I'll say is on the Leo Terrell Geraldo fight. I mean, it's absurd in every way. No, everyone's wrong, but in different ways. So Geraldo says, basically you're not from the hood, so you don't know, right? Well, that doesn't mean you don't know, right? That you can still have an opinion on it, and he's trying to kind of shame him for it. And then Geraldo says I was from Avenue C. Yeah, dude, that was like 60 years ago. Let's keep it real, all right? You're both incredibly wealthy, and part of the reason you're incredibly wealthy is because you go on Fox News. But I give Geraldo one piece of credit. I disagree with him on a lot of things. But the one game he doesn't play is what everybody else on Fox News plays. They bring on Leo Terrell. Keep it real. Why? Because they wanted to criticize the black mayor. So they wanted the black guy to criticize the black mayor and call her racist. And so he played that role, and he plays it willingly. And that's why he doesn't live where he grew up anymore. That's part of the reason, at least, okay? But Geraldo doesn't do that. When they say, oh, Latinos and immigrants are bad, he's like, no, I agree with you on the lower taxes and I hate everybody else, but no, we're okay, right? And then Leo Terrell, like, no, I grew up somewhere. Yeah, I grew up in Istanbul till I was 8 years old. To say that I know what's happening in Istanbul now is absurd, right? It's not that I couldn't, but to claim like, oh, I'm from the hood of Istanbul. No, come on. So Fox News, congrats. You found a way for everyone on the screen to be wrong.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, Jayar. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.